Last night we heard from whistleblowers about what we were told was a culture of fear at University's Hospital Birmingham Trust.
I and other consultants have raised concerns about patient safety, and we realised if you do, that you will get punished quite quickly and quite harshly. So they will make all kinds of spurious investigations, and they will try to intimidate you that way.
Among them, Dr. Manos Nikoloussis, who was asked in 2017 to investigate 20 deaths in the haematology department of Queen Elizabeth Hospital Birmingham, part of the trust.
I would say that there was definitely a lack of safe patient care and a lack of ownership of the patient, a lack of looking after the patient the way they should look after these patients in a very detailed way, in detailed management.
Dr. Nikoloussis told us he was shocked by what he found in the haematology department, but it wasn't clear to him that any action was taken as a result of his report. 2 years after Dr. Nikoloussis' report, 55-year-old builder Frank Bird was admitted to the same department with a recurrence of a gallbladder problem that he'd had before. 9 weeks later, he was dead. His daughter Sharan got in touch with us after our report last night.
I felt relieved that somebody had said what I had seen and what my family witnessed. It felt like the doctors higher up, they sort of run things, but to however they carelessly want to, whereas anybody underneath them, if they see it and they want to speak up, they're too scared to. You can see that they're too scared to. They don't want to because they don't want to lose their jobs. They don't want to lose their living. They have to put their family first, although what they're seeing in front of them is wrong. You only ever really will get that certain doctor who would speak up, and when I saw that doctor speaking up, it made me think that this doctor was around at that time and he must have been living what we was living for him to be able to speak out about how bad the care was there.
Even though the family were convinced it was the same gallbladder problem that Fred had had before, it appeared no one was listening.
He said over and over again, this is my gallbladder, and if you don't take it out and you keep looking for cancer, I'm going to die.
Because they thought it was cancer?
Yeah, they thought it was cancer.
Doctors initially insisted that Fred had already had his gallbladder removed, even though this was not the case. The Trust later apologised to the family for what they called this confusion.
He was struggling to eat. When Dad's gallbladder would play up, he would cut down his food and he wouldn't really eat, and then the symptoms would get better. So in hospital, Dad was trying to eat and he would get a lot of pain, so he'd just cut down what he was eating. Eventually, after about 2 weeks in hospital, he couldn't no longer swallow.
Even though he couldn't swallow, Fred was still prescribed pills that were simply left to accumulate next to his bed.
When we first went in, there was a nurse who was concerned for how my dad was, and she would look up things with me on the computer and she'd show me that, like, you know, this needs looking into and that needs looking into. She'd raise that, but she wouldn't be heard.
Why were their concerns not being listened to?
I don't know, really. It's like they don't have a voice. It's like I'm speaking and I'm not being heard, but then they're speaking and they're not being heard.
By now, in a weak state, Fred Bird was treated with chemotherapy for the cancer. But when he later died, the post-mortem found he had sepsis related to an infection.
To lose my dad, he was so young, he'd done everything. He would decorate my house and he was a strong, strong man. But to see him go from such a strong man to somebody who was fearful, it's not right. That shouldn't happen. Not in a hospital. A hospital is there to care and look after you. It's horrific what we all seen and what we went through. I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Sharan Bird, well, David is here now with more from the Trust that's unfolded today. But the point was surely that the culture of the NHS was meant to have been sorted out and a proper system put in place, a kind of national whistleblowing system.
Indeed, it seems quite depressing to say. It seems we've been here many times before. You'll remember in 2013, after that appalling scandal at Mid-Staffs, where hundreds of patients died in appalling conditions and shocking neglect, we were told that the whole architecture for whistleblowing had been updated, overhauled in the NHS, and people were going to be encouraged to come forward, no recriminations. But skip forward to another report into another scandal, this time Telford Hospital maternity care, published just this year, the final report. And the report's author, Donna Ockenden, noted with regret that many of the people that she'd interviewed for her report got evidence from insiders, asked at the last minute for that evidence to be withdrawn, taken out of the final report. Why? Because they feared, even though it was anonymous, that somehow they might be identified, and if they were, they feared recriminations. So for whistleblower campaigners, in the decade since Mid-Staffs, they say not enough has changed in the NHS.
Well, clearly, if you haven't got safety in speaking up, if you're going to, your career's at risk, or in the allegations on your report, you may find yourself referred to the GMC for your professional practice. You know, your career is at stake, and sadly for a lot of whistleblowers, whistleblowing has a very serious impact on them, on their careers, their families, their finances. It can be a lifelong experience, and we've got to change that, because whistleblowers are so important. Getting people to speak up to stop harm, identifying risks early, you know, it's a really valuable tool for trusts, and they've got to be listened to.
So, you know, we heard from Liz Gardner there. She made reference to the GMC, but you've got news on the GMC.
Yeah, in our report last night, we reported that at this trust, at University Hospitals Birmingham Trust, over the decade up until March this year, they referred 26 of their own doctors to the GMC for investigation. And of those, there was zero action taken. Not one of those doctors, any action was taken by the GMC. Now, the allegation, of course, was that this was being used as some way of trying to silence doctors, warn them that if you speak out, then something bad might happen to you. So we went to the GMC today and said, how does that look compared to the national UK picture? And that's what we got from them. There were, in a similar period, not quite the same period, 2,828 referrals by employers to the GMC, in the same way that those 26 from Birmingham. But in this case, 33%, a third, action was taken
so
against...
Birmingham was completely out of kilter.
Well, it's very different. Zero is a lot different to a third.
So, what have you been hearing from the Trust today?
Well, the Trust told us that they take patient safety very seriously. They have a high reporting culture of incidents to ensure appropriate accountability and vitally learning. They went on to tell us all patient safety concerns and incidents are rigorously investigated to prevent harm to our patients, and this may be difficult, they said, to some colleagues. They went on, there are established routes and support in place for individuals to raise concerns they may have that we promote and encourage. Now, in Frank Bird's case, the Trust told us they again extended their deepest sympathies to the family and were determined that the right lessons would be learned.
David, thank you very much.